Greetings to all of you, and it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to talk to a Times Talk audience for the second time in 2 weeks. I apologize I can't be there in person, but I'd like to take the chance to address the question of the day, which is, what is the mission for NASA in the era after the space shuttle has stopped flying? Well, NASA has many missions, not just one. Dr. Adams has or will talk about some of those. I'd like to focus on human spaceflight, though, because the theme of World Space Week this year is 50 years of human spaceflight, and because one of the major changes with the end of the shuttle is that we can't put people in space, or at least into Earth orbit, at will. Right now, astronauts can't go because Soyuz is grounded for safety concerns, so we're seeing some issues arising with that already. Let's set the stage for what's been going on. There have been a lot of shifts in NASA's human spaceflight focus in recent years. For a while, there was discussion of a mission to return to the moon and eventually go to Mars. More recently, there has been a lot of discussion about sending a human mission to an asteroid. These missions would be very technically challenging, quite risky in some cases, and extremely expensive. Estimates of the cost of a mission to Mars are somewhere around $200 billion, which is more than 10 times what NASA gets each year. I think the technical and risk aspects for these missions are solvable. On the other hand, right now and for the foreseeable future, the US and many other nations are suffering from an economic downturn that's proving very persistent. Public expenses in general are being reduced. There's a lot of other needs for those funds. So what do? Do we scale back human spaceflight in the United States? Eliminate it altogether? Do we encourage private industry to take over, where NASA once ran all the flights? Do we limit NASA just purely to doing research for future flights and hold off on human spaceflight entirely? To those of my generation, the answer to that question was sometimes obvious. We were all born, we lived through a wonderful era of space exploration. We felt the excitement of the endless potential and the pride in our nation for what we were able to accomplish. Human spaceflight personalized the challenges and accomplishments of all of humanity and made heroes that we could all admire. Untold numbers of young people were inspired to go into science by missions going from Mercury to Endeavour. I believe that these portions of NASA's mission will remain, but I think future major human missions are going to be different. I think first they'll be international in scope. In fact, space has already been one of the major ways in which nations can successfully cooperate peacefully. And I think it's fairly obvious that the costs of any of these large missions are simply too large for individual nations to afford. I also believe that NASA's human missions will be focused on the practical. Problems such as predicting the impact of asteroids or mitigating those impacts if they happen are major concerns, and right now we don't have a capability to do that. I think that self-sustaining colonies and a more gradual move throughout the solar system makes a lot more sense than grand public relations missions that gather a lot of attention and yield some interesting science but aren't sustained over the long haul. Finally, I do believe that private space efforts are going to continue and are likely to reduce the costs, if not of putting humans in orbit or beyond, but maybe in terms of supporting those missions. I don't think that space tourism is likely to generate major profits for a very long time. So what I really believe is going to happen is that NASA's mission as a publicly funded agency supervising human spaceflight will continue to be important, but there's going to be a lot more care taken with the kind of missions that we fly, and that those missions are likely to be focused on very specific needs rather than on broad science objectives. As a scientist, this is maybe a little bit unfortunate, but I also think it takes into account the reality of the situation that we live with. Thank you.